Introjections, the beliefs about the world that are holding you back. Welcome to the first part of this 4-part mini-series about shadows, how to heal them, and how to actually start doing deep unconscious healing on yourself if you're a total beginner all the way up to advanced. So I have my cheat sheet here, which I'm going to flash up onto the screen probably here for 1 or 2 minutes. And it's going to be in the link in the description below for you guys to go and take a look at in Google. And introjections are essentially sitting at the deepest part of our unconscious, okay? And they are a shadow. So when we use the word shadow, what that means is a part of our unconscious which our conscious mind doesn't like to look at. And they shape how we interpret meaning as we move forward in the world from the shadows, essentially. So you can look at it kind of like an intelligence agency that you don't really know anything about, but yet they are shaping public discourse. They are shaping the culture of the country you're from. They're letting information get in. They're letting certain information not get in. It's doing all of this stuff behind the scenes, which are affecting how you view the world. So an example of this would be, if you have a deep-rooted insecurity that you are not good enough, then that will affect and permeate into almost every single aspect of your life. So if someone gives you a smile on the street and you have this belief, you'll turn that smile, even if it means really well, you'll turn that smile into something which is not, which is, oh, that person's smiling at me, they're laughing at me. Or if somebody frowns in your direction, they'll be like, you see, that's because they see that X, Y, and Z is not up to scratch. They see that there's something about me which is not very palatable, let's say. So young men in particular, when it comes to red pill, or when it comes to looks maxing, or when it comes to incel communities or something like that, people get stuck in these negative loops because what they have is an introjection which they took on probably when they were very young, around something to do with their worth, around their looks, around how they act, how they behave, around men, around themselves in general. And then because there's already a weakness there, there's already a weakness in the shadow, there's already a blind spot, so much what we can kind of call fungus can grow there in the dark without us looking at it. And it's our job with shadow work to go in and heal that at the root cause, not just dealing with the symptoms, right? And what's going to be the next video after this is going to be my video around projections. So if introjections are how to heal deep unconscious insecurities by letting go of them, projections is how to heal deep unconscious insecurities by re-owning them. And introjections and projections, they work usually together. We have about the same amount of projections and introjections. So the reason why I mentioned that in an introject video is because we need to start looking at shadow work in a way where it's not just one. It's not just one thing after the other, after the other, after the other. In fact, what it is it's all of these things that are happening all together. Right? So we can have an introjection that we're not good enough, whilst also projecting any responsibility we have to take about that. So for example, oh, I feel like I'm not good enough, and then we can project any responsibility that we might have, like, oh, maybe we're not doing what we want to in life, we're not going after our goals, we're not crushing it. When it comes to socializing, we're not getting a handle on our bad habits, we're procrastinating. You know, I just made a video about procrastination. Go and watch that, because that's one of the ways that we can be pushing out responsibility into the world. And instead, when we do that, when we push our responsibility out in the world, we expect the world to take care of us, which just leads to us being stagnated, for people being stagnated in years and years and years. There's something that's super common that I see in my clients that come to work with me, and also the clients that go and work with kind of my friends that are in adjacent kind of work, which is, it's not just about healing an introjection or healing a deep-rooted insecurity. What also comes with that is usually there's a projection of power, of empowerment, of responsibility, of even acceptance sometimes, onto the external, which can create a massive loop. And if you don't address both of them, then you're not going to heal. So, as I've already touched on as we go through this, is the introjection healing process is called letting go or giving back. This is when all of the letting go stuff that you have most likely been exposed to actually comes into its own. And this is when it's really, really useful, with the caveat that we have to look at the root causes of the introjection and not just be letting go of the symptoms, triggers, or even mental processes. So I go into this in way more detail in my 3-hour free shadow work guide, which I have in the link in my description. Go and check that out. Go and download it. If you're interested in any kind of belief rewiring work, then that is the best thing that I've seen for free on the internet out there. So download it. It will change your life. But essentially what you have to do, which I go into detail, much more detail in that program, is you have to get to how, when, where, and why this started. Not necessarily why, actually, but the how, when, and where of how this insecurity started. Let's say you have an insecurity of not being good enough, right? And you have to give that back. You have to give the meaning back. So let me break that down even more in case it's getting a little bit confusing. So normally, let's make it like a really clean example. Like, we were growing up, and then our family, one of our family members, like our parents said, "Oh, you're not good enough. Like you're not good enough at that." And then that is you're just not good enough. It just gets interpreted as you're not just not good enough at life, right? Okay. And then that builds and it builds and it builds. We don't want to necessarily get too deep into the weeds of what has built on top of that. Because as we get older, our mind also gets more sophisticated, it gets more complex, it gets more expansive. That means that we can have more detailed and complicated storylines that come with that, because our mind can handle that. Instead, we can get a little bit of a handle of that. We can investigate what's kind of going on to get to grips with what's actually happening. But we have to move past those layers into where the core root started, to that inciting moment where your mum or your dad told you that you just weren't good enough, right? And what we're doing is we're not disowning reality, okay? That's really important. We're not disowning the fact that that never happened. Maybe they did say that. What we are giving back is the meaning that we then took of that. So there's the event, and then there's the meaning that it created. You can go through, like, as an adult now, as someone who's much more emotionally robust, somebody can tell you you're not good enough, and you can have the wherewithal to just not get affected by that because you're more mature, you have more defense mechanisms, there's less impressionability most of the time, especially if it's not from your parents. So the same thing can happen, but because you don't create a meaning from that, you don't take that to meaningly think about yourself, you don't develop that insecurity. So what we're giving back is not even necessarily, we can call it the insecurity, but it's the meaning that we made about that. So the meaning in this case would be, my parents said I'm not good enough, therefore I'm not good enough in general, right, in life. It's that we are extracting, and we're allowing that to give that back to the situation, to our parents. Now, the other way that we can give back introjections is, it's not just one time period. It can be like a period of 6 months, a year, maybe even a few years, where maybe we just have a particular lesson just keep on being beat into us. For example, if we're going to stick with the example of not being good enough, maybe there's like a whole year where we try out like sports, which we try and do X, Y, and Z. We maybe ask out our first crush, or we try a test, and there's all these things that happen, and we just get loads of L's basically in that time period, which is unfortunate. But then instead of it just being an unfortunate time period, we then, from all of this data, we collect the meaning that, oh wait, that if I'm just being said known to in these 6 months, that just means that me intrinsically as a person is not good enough, right? And that can make sense to us at that time period, because that feels really real, that feels really visceral, and we can have compassion for ourselves. But it's that meaning that we have to go back and give it back to that time period, right? So we can give it back to a place, we can give it back to a time period, we can give it back to people. And it can either be one inciting moment, or it can be a moment, a lesson that's kind of been beat into us over years, months, weeks, sometimes even decades, right? Another thing that needs to be addressed here is the third video in this series is going to be about split ego states, which will be the most complicated out of everything, which is why, especially if you have any split ego states, I would go and recommend the 3-hour program. And then, to be honest, even then I would recommend you finding a one-on-one mentor to work with if you're not an advanced practitioner, because it's just so easy to get lost. But introjections are not just held onto by ourselves, okay? They can be held on to by what we can call different parts or different ego states within us. So we can have an ego state that's a 5-year-old. We can have an ego state that's like a moody teenager. We can have an ego state which is a really critical adult. We can have an ego state that takes the form of our parents, of friends, of our high school crush, or whatever it is. And then because these are different ego states, these are different parts, these are basically different mini personas of people, they have their own goals and they have their own motivations, they have their own storylines, and they can hold on to their own introjects. And that's why it can oftentimes feel like there's a part acting out against us, and why just integrating that part isn't enough. Because the reason why that part is acting out is because they're holding on to an introjection. Like, I'm just different, I'm just special, there's something wrong with me, the rest of me doesn't like me, all that kind of stuff. And that's something that's actually really common with things like procrastination and self-sabotage. So just some food for thought. And to really round out your understanding of introjections, of how this channel works, because this will be a foundational playlist in this channel, is the fact that introjections are not always bad, okay? Sometimes they're functional, and they're how we make sense of the world a lot of the time, because they're lessons that have been given to us. So introjections, they're not just bad beliefs. A more comprehensive view of them is that they are any time that a external force or influence has implanted something into us that wasn't there to begin with. So if we see a fire as a kid and we reach out and we touch the fire with our hand, the reason why we do that is because we're curious. We don't know what a fire is. In that moment, we have introjected into us, fires are hot, don't do that. Nobody would argue that that is something which isn't functional. Or most people would argue. There's always a contrarian out there that will argue with anything, right? We all know those people. But that's a functional worldview. However, what can happen then is, based on how stressful the scenario is, how other people react in the environment, just how our constructs are already set up in that place, we can then create an insecurity out of fire. Fire is inherently dangerous and is something which I should run away from whenever I see it, even like a little match or something. That's when an introject can turn harmful and it turns into shadow. But if it's just in terms of, oh, fire is hot, don't touch fire, then that's very functional. That's what an introjection can be. It's when we don't have something internally and externally something gives it to us or pushes it onto us, which is why the healing process is giving back. Why? Because you can give back something which isn't authentically yours. When it becomes really dangerous is when people just have the framework of letting go and they try and give back a part which is misbehaving. But that part is just authentically you. And instead, what you're doing, or instead of integrating a part, which is what you have to do, which is obviously what I'm going to go into detail with the split ego state video, is you have to get rid of the divide between you, and there has to be a coming together, an integration. But if you're giving that part back, you're just creating that divide even more, which just leads to more self-sabotage, more procrastination, more fighting against yourself, and more just being confused, which is usually one of the hallmarks of split ego states. We are just interested in getting rid of introjections that are infected and created out of shadow. That's the only thing we're interested in. Only when you're very advanced can you start really playing around with constructs. That's when I would advise. Constructs are, imagine introjections, but they are not shadow-based. But you can still have a functional construct that could be more functional, or maybe isn't super adaptive. So you can update them, right? But that's something which, just hold on to that. If you're one of my one-on-one clients listening to that, and you're interested, we can have a chat about that. But if that's not you, then that's just some food for thought for you to think about in the future. And, like I said, I go into all of the detail in my 3-hour most practical guide to shadow work on the internet. But you might be asking, okay, I've got introjections down. I've got an understanding of what they are. They're kind of like bad beliefs. I know the letting go process, the giving back. You've kind of explained how to do that, how to get to the root cause, or you've explained what the root cause is, but you haven't really explained how to get there. Well, the best way in all of my years of traditional hypnotherapy, conversational hypnotherapy, psychotherapy-based shadow work, and then some developmental psychology, which is kind of relevant here, is the best way to get to the bottom of that is by asking yourself questions with curiosity. And it's really, really important that you don't ask yourself the question why. Why is a reality enforcing question, okay? So if I am feeling bad right now, let's say I'm feeling a little bit fearful or a little bit anxious, and I ask myself a why question there, why am I feeling anxious? I have just cemented the reality that first of all, there's this anxiety, I am feeling anxious, right? And it's got something to do with me, I am feeling anxious. Whereas if I was to change that to a mechanical question, a what or a how question, this is the type of question that I would ask. To rephrase why am I feeling anxious, how I would rephrase that to a what question is, what is making me feel like I feel that I'm anxious, right? I'm not cementing a reality there. I'm getting deeper into the mechanical question. I'm getting deeper into the mechanics of the what without attaching my sense of self or a storyline to it. What is making me feel anxious? Well, the thing that's making me feel anxious is the fact that I just doom scrolled on my bed for 1 hour instead of working. Okay. Whereas if I answer that question with why, with the why question earlier, like why am I feeling anxious? I am feeling anxious because I just wasted time doom scrolling on my bed. And that's like the end of it. Whereas with a what question, I can be like, and what made me do that? Well, it's because I was already feeling stressed and I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to do this work. So I just freaked out and I stopped. And I stopped doing work and I just doom scrolled. We're getting deeper and deeper into the problem without attaching any kind of a storyline to it. You can also do the same with how. How are really good mechanical questions. So let's say I'm feeling anxious again. How would I rephrase that to a how question? How is it that I am feeling anxious right now? So the question is not the I, why am I? The question is the how. How am I feeling anxious? Well, I'm feeling anxious because, or how I began to feel anxious is because I woke up with bad sleep. And how did that happen? It's because I went to bed later. How did that happen? It's because I scheduled a date or I scheduled a party before my workday, right? So we're getting so much more deeper into the question, and getting so much more valuable feedback about how this started. Because if I didn't ask any of those questions, I would just be stuck with I'm feeling anxious. But now I'm realizing, it's because I was feeling stressed, because I didn't sleep well. I can actually get to the root of what's making me do those behaviors if I know what's bad for me. Excuse me. And it's like, it's because that's when you start to uncover some self-sabotage. If I'm putting loads of pressure on myself, but then automatically I'm also scheduling dates or parties or times to go out when I shouldn't be, then that's something which isn't conducive to my goals right now, which is to go and build business or train or do X, Y, and Z. Okay. So that's how you get to the deeper core root of what's actually happening. For those of you that are just getting into this right now, just play around with that. Download the free practical guide to shadow work. But as you're doing that, you just play around with the what questions. Go through a week to 3 to 4 weeks of not allowing yourself to ask why questions. Just ask what and how questions and when questions as well. This gets you so much more creative. When you get more creative, you start thinking in different ways. When you start thinking in different ways, blind spots become smaller because you're thinking in a different way. You're not going through the old stale thought processes that are keeping you trapped in those blind spots. When those blind spots get smaller, and sometimes even because you get so creative with those questions, you are able to look at your blind spots, that's when breakthroughs are made. Just with that, not even with the last part, which I'm going to go into here, that will make sure that you are always keeping on your toes and you're not being stuck. If you have like beliefs or insecurities or things that you feel like are holding you back, This is one of the best ways. This is one of the biggest needle movers in my journey and also in my clients' journey whenever they start working together with me. That gets you from having to be either reliant on a coach or reliant on somebody telling you what to do to being able to be creative and do what you need to do with initiation, right? And like I said, the last part is don't get lost in the symptoms, don't get lost in the triggers, and don't get lost in the mental processes. Symptoms and triggers are pretty self-explanatory. Symptoms are just the symptom of anxiety. The trigger is, oh, it happens whenever I go on my bed. I start doom scrolling, right? Each one is deeper. Triggers are deeper than symptoms. Mental processes are deeper than triggers. Mental processes are where some of the best therapists kind of sit, but it's still not deep enough because, or like coaches sit, because it's like, okay, so what makes me lying on my bed be a trigger? Oh, because it makes me relax and it makes me a little bit bored and I want to pass the time. That's like a mental process, right? Whereas for somebody else, lying on the bed doesn't do that. Otherwise, lying on the bed would be a universal trigger for doom scrolling, and it's not, right? So you can get really deep with mental processes. Instead, you want to go one step deeper, which is finding out how is it that this habit began? How is it that this behavior began? And that is the Introjection part 1 video. So watch it, rewatch it, do the exercise I just laid out for you. Just ask yourself what and how questions for 1 to 4 weeks. Download the most practical guide to shadow work on the internet. It'll be sent over to you. Just got to sign up your email. I'll send you a follow-up email as well, just checking in your progress, make sure you're getting the best experience, and stay tuned for part 2.